Well, let's move now to our focus report. As we've heard, French President Emmanuel Macron is on an official visit to Senegal, where together with Senegalese President Macky Sall, he's chairing the Global Partnership for Education Conference, the only multilateral fund dedicated to development aid, a mandate priority for the French leader. For donors, Senegal is a star pupil, as the West African country allocates 24% of its budget to education. Yet despite significant efforts, this key sector still faces major challenges, such as poor learning conditions and strong regional disparities. Our Dakar correspondent Sarah Sacco reports.
The brand new building of the Unit 18 High School in the suburbs of Dakar embodies the new type of educational establishments wanted in Senegal. The high school was funded by the French development agency's ADAM project, which aims to better learning conditions in schools. A small revolution for the parents and students in this working-class neighbourhood.
You see over there, what is now a proper classroom used to be just 2 tents. Just imagine the working conditions for teachers and students having to study in a tent.
Part of the ADAM project is to improve the quality of teaching and strengthen teacher performance, especially when it comes to science, which suffered from a declining interest by students. In this chemistry class, experiments are now part of the curriculum.
It allows us to learn a lot of things, to better understand what we're doing in class.
Every time I teach a class, I want the students to try and create something themselves with the equipment here. Before we received the training, we focused almost exclusively on theory.
The pilot project set up in recent months seems to be paying off.
In terms of results, our students have improved a lot. We're satisfied with what's been done because we've really come a long way.
Teacher training is part of a comprehensive reform led by the government to improve the quality of education, one of Senegal's biggest challenges. For nearly 20 years, the state undertook a massive recruitment drive of volunteers, unskilled and poorly trained people. The school enrollment rate increased, but the level of education has deteriorated. Since 2012, the government has tried to turn things around. Recruitment is stricter, and so is the required curriculum. Teachers receive ongoing training, especially those who learnt on the job.
The Senegalese state has implemented a policy which requires that all assistant teachers who didn't receive adequate training come here and complete their instruction. This system works on a yearly rotation, and we really give them the necessary tools to become a good teacher.
Betty Diane is one of the teachers that's come back to school. She was hired in 2008 with just a basic school completion certificate. She remembers her difficult early years in teaching.
Très bien. On avait fait la leçon. Respire, parler. Très bien.
Qualified teachers and colleagues came over and they set up workshops. They came to our classrooms and helped us, providing us with guidance. I can feel there's a big difference now, a big positive change when it comes to how I run my classes, the way I work and the way I address my pupils.
Despite such efforts in the public sector, challenges remain, particularly with a lack of regulation of traditional Quranic schools, known as daras, that operate informally. Some of these daras are known to be derelict, run-down places, schools where physical and moral abuse is commonplace. Children are even sent by teachers to beg on the streets. Here at Omar Senyan's dara, around 30 children between 5 and 15 years old receive a religious education in precarious conditions.
The child studies until 1 p.m. and then goes out to beg for food. It's the same in the evening. Sometimes they go begging, sometimes they stay here and the neighbours come over and give them a meal. I'm the one paying the rent and the bills. Some people don't want their children to attend French-speaking schools. Everyone has the right to choose what he wants to study, don't they?
After years of consultation, a draft law on the status of daras was finally approved in December. An important step, according to the authorities, who want to gradually modernise this sector.
Modernization will focus on 2 aspects: assisting Daras Quranic schools to improve the physical learning environment for children and secondly, working on an institutional framework. These legal frameworks will make it possible to integrate Quranic schools into the educational system and to be able to carry out inspections, but at the same time to be able to support them with grants.
NGOs have requested such a draft law for years. 37% of Senegalese children aged between 6 and 16 are outside the education system.
Well, for more on this, let's cross to my guest. Journalist and political analyst Adam Magai joins us from Dakar. Hello, thank you very much for being with us on France 24. Let's perhaps start on the last figure given in that report. 37% of Senegalese children are outside the education system. Why is that?
Look, Senegal is a country that has to cope with a very difficult situation, because you have, on the one hand, a country that is really very religious, oriented toward Islamic training. On the other hand, you have a state that is weak in order to implement the modern form of education, because despite the 24% of the budget allocated to education, and even before it used to be over 30% during the first years of independence under the first president of Senegal, Léopold Sédar Senghor. Despite all these efforts, financially, you still have problem in order to bring everybody within the scope of the training mechanism. Because people for long believed in informal possibilities to access, to succeed in life, to a point where in Senegal people are saying now, you don't need to go through what is called in French LMD system, LMD, which is bachelor, master's or doctorate level. You have to go through wrestling, you have to go through dance, you have to go through music, or you have to go through even soccer in order to be successful. People have a problem with the credibility of school, because it's no longer really the way for people to rise to the highest level within society. So the government has to really convince people that school remains still relevant.
And is enough being done also to address the huge disparities between the capital, Dakar, and the country's rural areas?
Some efforts are being done, but not enough. Of course, like most African countries, when Senegal became independent, especially Senegal, because it used to be the capital of West African states of Francophone colonial nations, and that were in the capital, that's Dakar, where all the resources were located, like the university, the port, the airport, everything was in Dakar, and people had to come to Dakar to get job, to take advantage of the income that people had within the capital city, whereas most of the rural area used to be really abandoned, disregarded, dismissed without any facilities. But today what is happening is that people realize that this social inequity, if it is not addressed, it may lead really to tension, and it's somehow a social bomb to allow these rural people to continue coming to Dakar, where the resources are no longer enough to cater for them. So in this regard, yes, the problem exists, but the fact that you have to acknowledge it and the government realize that it's a problem is at least something that one can be comfortable with at the moment.
And what do you make of former colonial power France getting involved in the continent's education drive?
Look, France is doing it properly, I believe. It is its own interest. France knows that in Africa you have 7 billion people. In 2050 there will be 9 billion people. Out of them there are at least 2 billion almost Africans that need education. This is services that need to be provided for by school institutions. And so governments of France realizes that it's a possibility to take advantage of this need to come and train people within Africa, and at the same time to avoid the migration flow to Europe or France. So this is something somehow very intelligent for France to do it. But let's be very pragmatic. As President of Ghana, Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo told it to Emmanuel Macron when he visited there in November, end of November, he said, this problem of education, of health and infrastructures, and even fixing our people within Africa, that mainly have to be done by Africans themselves, African states, instead of using the coffers of their countries to buy luxury goods, to travel to Europe, to stay in 5-star hotel or buy houses abroad. So I think that even France has maybe useful in part of partnership, but is not enough. And the mere fact that only 9 heads of state from Africa, mainly Francophone people, came to the summit on education being organized here in Senegal is an indication that there are many countries that are not comfortable having France taking the lead in these kind of things. Africans need in a sovereign way to control whatever they have to do for their development, whether it is education, infrastructure, health, and other sectors.
And briefly, if you would, you mentioned immigration, but President Macron also sees education as a key tool to steer young minds away from Muslim radicalization. Why is Senegal the right place to address this problem?
Senegal is a country where really the Islam tradition is very tolerant, and you don't have really risk of terrorism here so far. The problem, however, is the management of the country, the economic and democratic management of the country. If you don't allow democracy to prevail, and if you don't allow people to speak out and proper elections to be organized, and if you don't allow the resources of the country to be controlled by the nation, instead of foreigners coming and taking our oil and gas and other resources and depriving the local people from their resources, you may create, despite the effort for education, conditions, you can create conditions for people to radicalize and become extreme against France, because there is a negative attitude toward France at the moment, and that can lead to other even more negative aspects, including terrorism and other aspects that so far doesn't exist because of the tolerant aspect of Muslim and Islamists in Senegal.
Adama Gaye, thank you very much for having spoken to us. And that's where we're leaving this edition live from Paris. Stay tuned, we'll have a full news update for you at the top of the hour.